If everyone can learn to surrender and trust in divine timing, because we want everything right now.
Yes.
We want everything
Yes.
right now, but there is a force that knows better for you when is the right time. So if you're
Yeah.
willing to trust in that, and again, if it's God, universe, whoever, whatever you choose to believe in, but if you just say all right, I'm going to trust they're going to give it to me at the right time, whether it's money, love, job, house, whatever, then what can
Mm-hmm.
I do right now?
Yeah.
Can you please help me to receive what it is that I need right now?
Hi, I'm Biz Cush, a life coach and therapist, and your host here on the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. We're talking to women all over the world who found their way back to themselves, to their inner knowing, to their intuition, to their wisest self. We're exploring how to feel alive, authentic, engaged, and fully present in your life. Let's awaken your wise woman. Hi, and welcome back. I'm Biz Cush, your host, and this is the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. Before we jump into our guest this week, I just wanted to share how much I appreciate the listeners, the followers, the people who sign up for my newsletter. I just feel so connected, even though maybe I don't know you. I feel you out there as a community. The sensitive women, the women in midlife, the women wanting to find connection together here in different ways. And I just really appreciate that. I really do. And I feel it in my heart. I feel your energy in my heart. And if you're feeling like you are in need of community, a group of women that understands you and what it's like to live in an insensitive world when you are highly sensitive, there's still time to sign up for my group. And I would love for you to join us. The group starts May 23rd. And you need to book an info call with me, a brief 30-minute at the most info call with me to be sure the group is right for you and that you're right for the group, because we want the space to feel sacred and safe and welcoming. So check out where to sign up on my website, elizabethcushcoaching.com, and go to the group coaching tab, and you will find a way to reach out to schedule that 30-minute call. And today's guest just fills that for me too. She was very open about her work. And what really amazes me is that although therapy, energy work, shamanism, which we will talk about today, can feel so different, the modality itself, and yet the deep work so often involves releasing burdens and stories that we have taken on through culture and family and our legacy. And when we can release those burdens, retell those stories about ourselves, about who we are and what we believe, when we are able to fully embrace the stories and meanings that are meant for us, it can shift how we live our life, how we feel in our lives, how we feel about ourselves. And I just love that commonality. I love the thread of healing that is present throughout all these different modalities. And I think that's what has blown me away about the conversations I've had here on the podcast over the years. And you just have to find the modality, the way, the path that works for you, that resonates for you and your parts. And if you're curious about working with me, please reach out. Go to my website, elizabethcushcoaching.com. There's a form there that you can fill out, and we can schedule a time for a free call to explore what working with me looks like and whether that is a good fit for you. All right, without further ado, today's guest is Athena Monet, and here's a little bit more about her. Athena Monet is an author, gifted intuitive healer, and spiritual guide. Born into a lineage of gifted women, Athena inherited the extraordinary gifts of clairvoyance and clairsentience from her family. Fueled by a deep curiosity and thirst for knowledge, Athena immersed herself in the realms of art, interior architecture, and diverse spiritual disciplines during her studies at Ohio State University. She explored the realms of yoga, astrology, philosophy, Buddhism, and anthropology, almost completing a minor in anthropology, a path that would shape her understanding of human experiences and cultures. After spending a decade working at prominent commercial architecture firms in Washington, D.C., Athena felt a calling to break free from the corporate world. Today, Athena continues to walk her sacred path and guide others, guided by the ancestral wisdom that flows through her being. I'm excited to talk to Athena about her work and shamanism, so let's jump into our conversation. Hi, Athena, and welcome to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to dive into our conversation. But for the listeners who don't know who you are, could you share a little bit about yourself and what inspires you?
Yeah. So I am located in the Delaware Beach area. A lot of people, when I say Delaware, they're like, what? Like, where's Delaware? Yeah, so I live in the little Delaware Beach town, which is like the first town in the first state, and it's a very tiny little town. I moved here 8 years ago from the DC area,
Mm.
and I made a complete life change. I worked in architecture previously, and I was really interested in yoga and metaphysics. And so I ended up, through the traditional shamanic way, finding myself sick in need of help, chronically sick. And
Wow.
the Western doctors were not able to help me. And so eventually I found my way to a shaman who helped me to heal. And she also became a teacher for me. And I left architecture and became a shaman eventually.
Mm.
So that was about 8 years ago. So I've been practicing for the most part. I never actually intended to become a shaman. So I signed up for her training because she said, you have these gifts that you're not using. Maybe you should do a shaman training. And I was like, she probably says that to everyone. But then I ended up meeting two other shamans that said the same thing. And so at that point, I was like, maybe I'll do that ladies training.
Wow.
So I did the training just curious. I was teaching yoga kind of like part time, like moonlighting as a yoga teacher at the time, and
Mm.
still doing a little bit of architectural work, freelancing. And I thought, I'll do this shaman training and maybe it'll make me a better yoga teacher. And then I'll like figure my life out. And I did the training and like immediately was approached by a yoga studio owner who was like, hey, I have these treatment rooms in the back. I just bought this new studio. Do you want to come try to do shamanic work here? Like literally like, right when I graduated the program.
Wow.
And I was like, if I don't have to pay for it and you're just going to take a small percentage, then there's no stress on me earning or bringing people in. And for your listeners, like when things are meant to be, they just flow. Like they literally just flow. You don't have to think about it. When
Yeah.
it's not, like when there's so much resistance, there's always trust that there's a reason why, and that's not your path. So allow yourself to be rerouted
Yeah.
divine. But for me, it was like this very natural flow into my space. My teacher actually also invited me to apprentice with her. So
Wow.
for a while, I went on to do other shaman trainings and travel and study. And then I kind of made the switch from student to teacher, but always a student, right? Lifetime student.
Yeah.
So then I was invited to teach. People started to come to me and ask me to train them in
Wow.
what I was doing. And it just grew. So now, 7, 8 years later, I have hundreds of clients all over the country, world, some outside of this country. And
Amazing.
I'm changing my model now to support groups because, like we talked about, I'm a mom with 5 kids, 2 dogs.
A
Totally have
busy
nobody
life.
else. Yeah, hours in the day. So the group model is really, really working for me right now with a few private clients here and there and groups. And
Nice.
I'm doing it through my soul medicine program.
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
So, are there any things inspiration wise that feel important to mention? I always ask that at the beginning, like what inspires you? And I just had another conversation prior to this, and we got all the way to the end. And I was like, oh my gosh, we sort of blew past that question. So, I want to be
Yeah.
intentional about.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, things I draw inspiration from. So I started out in fine arts in college before I switched over into studying architecture. I did interior architecture. And
Mm,
my thinking with that was like, oh, I can make art with actual physical space. And
wow. Wow.
so I went into corporate architecture afterward. I still love design and visual arts, and I like to travel and see art shows. I love jewelry art, all forms of art. Like I'm so present for that. But also, I view gardening and landscaping as an art form. And that's probably the one that I'm most
Ah,
passionate about.
wow.
So for me, a lot of times when I am thinking of my clients, even my own children,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about them through the lens of like seeds, or I like to buy plants into season when they look like they're dying. And then you buy the plant and you plant it. And the next year you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this plant is thriving in this
Mm,
way. And so with my clients, I view them a lot of times like those seeds or those baby plants or the plants that are, just barely, hanging
undernourished or yeah, right.
undernourished, exactly. And you're just like hanging by a thread. And so, and then we do the work and we cultivate their lives in the same way that we cultivate the garden. So
Wow.
that's been
Wow.
really, really awesome to be able to take my love of gardening and plants and to translate that into my work. Yeah, it's very fulfilling and inspiring.
Yeah, that's amazing. And love that idea of bringing a plant or a person sort of back to life, right?
Yeah.
To their full flourishing, blooming selves, right?
Yeah.
So I would guess there are listeners that really have very little concrete idea of what shamanic work is like
Yeah.
and may have false impressions of what it involves. So I would love for you to share more about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it can look like a lot of different things. I would compare it to medicine, right? To traditional medicine. There's so many different avenues, even micro modalities within traditional medicine. The same
Mhm.
goes for shamanism. So there's so many different types of shamans. Shamans span various cultures, various religious groups. They span various belief systems, right? And so do traditional medical doctors.
Sure.
Also, shamans come with different sets of gifts, right? But
Mm.
kind of the one overarching, I would say, thread with what I understand to be all shamans is that we are working with the spirit world on behalf of others and on behalf
Mm.
of our planet. So that's like the main definition that I have for what is a shaman. It's someone who's working with the spirit world on behalf of you and on behalf of our planet. Also, meaning with the animal world, the animal kingdom.
Mm.
So, with that said, shamans can help with a wide range of ailments, human conditions, right? And
Mhm.
it could span from what looks and feels like life coaching.
Mhm.
Sometimes a session with me might feel like life coaching, can look like having a really long sit down with your doctor, right? Because sometimes we feel like we need somebody to diagnose us, like tell me what's wrong with my body. So myself, and I know several other shamans who work with medical intuition, which is where we have the ability to see into the body to help to diagnose and to also refer out to specialists. So I'm not writing like a formalized prescription for a specialist, but I can direct my clients to, hey, you need to see a blood specialist, you need to look up this cancer doctor, you need to go see this endocrinologist or this neurotherapist. So in that sense, I'm working very much with the medical intuitive side and
Mm.
the medicine side, but
Hmm.
I also hear remedies specifically from spirit. So I've counseled clients through their cancer when they chose to go free of
Mm.
chemo, free of radiation, and to do it on their own. I will be supported by the spirit world, as is my client, with how to do that. And I had a
Oh.
really awesome experience last year with a client who we tracked from July to July. She was diagnosed. They measure the tumor
Hmm.
and diagnosed breast cancer. And we went through a series of protocols, which were all guided by spirit. I heard things I've never heard of.
Wow.
And it was, I mean, down to like, they were telling me to tell her, drink oxygenated water,
Hmm.
telling specific types of herbs and minerals, and get to the sauna and all these things. And then they would guide and direct her to other specialists, and I would as well. And when we went for another screening, they measured the tumor. This was like in the winter. They measured the tumor. It had shrunken, and
Wow.
so it had shrunken, and it also, they identified it as a non-mass, which we kind of giggled about. And we were like, what exactly is a non-mass? So it was a mass, and now it's a small non-mass. And the doctor said, well, maybe when you went in initially, maybe they didn't hold the breast in the same position under the machine. Like they were trying to find reasons why is it measuring
Wow.
smaller and differently, and they couldn't figure it out. And honestly, I think
So they
there's
just labeled it differently.
they're like, maybe it was the machine and the way that they held your breast, and like, okay. So things like this, really, really cool, kind of
Mm.
miraculous healings happen quite a bit. I've had clients also who are struggling with, trauma, a lot of trauma. I help a lot of women through the worst kinds of trauma and restoring themselves, reclaiming their souls after they've experienced some of these traumas. It can be so powerful to
Oh
witness,
my gosh. I
right?
bet. I bet.
So yeah, there's a lot. There's the physical healing, the emotional healing, watching clients change their lives, leave their jobs, leave their relationships that are not serving them anymore. I've had clients who were really wanting to get married, and we were able to really put them on the track towards finding their soulmates.
Mm.
Clients who wanted to get pregnant, and we did the healing where, maybe on a deeper level their body was not ready for birth, or their life wasn't ready for birth. So doing some of that energetic work, it literally spans everything.
Yeah, like your entire sort of presence here on earth. Yeah, just
Yeah.
all the things, the struggles we encounter, whether it's physical or emotional or more
Yeah,
deeply
there's help. Yeah,
hurting.
spirit help available for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. And what drew you to seek out a shaman when you were struggling? Like,
Mm.
yeah,
Desperation. That's what brings
yeah.
most people to a shaman, right? Desperation. So it's like you try all the things, and then you're like, I guess I'll try this thing that person told me about. So that was what it was.
Mm.
A neighbor had told me about the medicine woman in my town. And I, for 7 months, was really trying to go the Western route, in and out of ER, severe gastro pain. Like almost a year, I was like in the worst gastro pain and vomiting every day, like lost a ton of weight. I was so sure that I had cancer because my mom had just passed from cancer. So I was like, she passed from colon cancer. I'm like, this has got to be some kind of stomach and intestinal colon cancer, right? And
Mm.
when I went to the shaman finally, after all the tests kind of were coming up like wonky and inconclusive, no diagnoses, and the doctors would say, maybe this, maybe that, driving up and down the state, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'll just try this one. I was completely desperate. I was on the edge. I was like, you know what? I don't want to live anymore. If this is
What life looks like. Yeah.
like I have this new baby, I can barely breastfeed her because I'm
Mm,
undernourished at this point
wow.
because I'm vomiting every day, right? And
Mm,
so I just was like, I was living on insure and rice, I was like, not a way to live. And so I
wow.
just felt like I don't want to do this anymore. So I called this woman. I got in there, and she put me on a table. I never experienced anything like it. It was all new for me. And she was like shaking my legs out, doing some all kinds of weird stuff. And then she like flips me over on the table. She's like, turn over, go ahead, sit up. And she's like, what are you sad about? And I was
Really?
like, whoa, right. And she's very blunt like this. I call
Uh-huh.
her shaman mama. And I was like, well, I was like, my mom, like, that's what I'm sad about. Like, she was my everything. And she's like, well,
Mm,
she's right here. And I was like, what?
wow.
And she started to channel messages from her to me right then and there. And I didn't know this woman, I've never met her. And she was spot on with every message from my mom. And so I knew, I was like, okay, there's something here. And then she said to me, if you don't grieve, it will become cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I knew she was telling the truth. So I was like, I got to figure out how to grieve. So that was what prompted, neighbor, desperation, physical pain and sickness, being on the brink of death. Like that's the traditional kind of initiation to the
Mm,
shaman.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and you hear so many stories of, especially today, I feel like, but I'm sure it's gone back through history of the medical, our traditional medical system of diagnoses, where I think of this more in terms of particularly for women with symptoms that there isn't any like, oh, aha, here it is. Here's the problem. And here's the medicine to fix it. It
Yeah.
can be years of misery, different doctors, different treatments, and frustration, or not even being heard or believed that there's something going on,
Hmm.
that I could see really needing to find someone that actually listens and can help you access what you need inside. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Exactly. And I now see it in my clients every day,
Yeah.
right? Where they're telling me, they're like, I had a client yesterday who suddenly started experiencing these bizarre seizures.
Mm.
And I've actually had seizures in the past as well. So I could completely empathize. And I said to her, I said, well, what all medications are you on? Because I feel like the medications are really triggering this. Did your doctors tell you that it could be the medications? She's like, no, they just gave me more. They just gave me more medication. I said, okay. She's like, they told me it was psychosomatic and they gave me
Of
more.
course. Of course. Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so I'm watching, but she also had a lot of interesting realization about what was occurring during her seizures. And she said to me that she felt like they were memories coming back when a seizure would trigger. And I said,
Wow.
okay, let's talk about that. Like, let's go into that. And so we went into it, and I was able to feel into her body, like right in the base of the spine. I said, oh, right here at the top of the spine. She's like, yeah, in my occipital, that's where they said that the seizures are starting. So we talked through like, okay, what's being held here? And it's memories that they're very painful. I said, I can feel a sharp pain tied to those memories, and they don't know where to go, right? There's no
Mm,
space to go. So they're not leaving, they're just coming because you don't know where to place them. So I said, let's place them in your hands. We can look at some of these together, but it is
mm,
scary to look at some of those on your own. And
absolutely.
forward, we discussed, which she was not able to have this conversation with her medical doctors. Well, what do you feel like the memories are? She said, feel like they're memories of sexual abuse stored in
Yeah.
my body. And I said, okay, let's go ahead and deal with that. Let's
Mm,
deal with this 5-year-old girl that's calling for your attention, and she wants to know that she's safe.
yeah.
And that's a conversation that wasn't even allowed to be presented with a neurologist.
Right.
It's not a space for that conversation.
No, no. And probably best that it wasn't brought up in that conversation,
Right,
knowing,
right. She's
yes.
like, it's a man. She's like, it's a man who's not going to listen to me. You know,
Yeah.
listen to me is what she said. I try to tell them, I
Mm,
tell them about the medications. They don't listen. They don't talk to each
mm.
other. Multiple doctors prescribing multiple medications. They aren't talking to one another, and her body is having awful reactions as a result.
Well, and it's interesting to me, like I've done personal work, but also training around internal family systems, which is parts work and, really attuning to your parts in compassionate, kind ways. But the force that they can come through to get your attention physically through your body, through, for me, it was always like anxiety, where like there were feelings there, but I could just, all I wanted to feel was the anxiety, right? I didn't really want to go into like what's beneath that. But just how forcefully these parts can show up in our bodies, like the traumatized 5-year-old or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And then, I just had the image of someone being handed a baby and they're not prepared and they don't know what to do with a baby. So you hand someone a baby and they're like, oh, they freeze. So sometimes those parts want to come back to us, but we're not ready for them. We're not equipped for what to do
Right.
with those parts.
Absolutely.
So because we were never trained, a lot of us weren't trained to be the parents that we want to be or the parents that we needed. So
Yep.
even though those parts need to be reparented, we might not have the training yet to reparent those parts and to nurture those parts or to create the safety. So with my clients, a lot of times we do it very gently. We do traditional shamanic soul retrieval work where we
Mm.
retrieve the soul and then we're actually guided and I channel to my client, now that we've brought back this part, here's what we're going to do with it, right? Like
Wow.
here's how we're going to take care of this part of ourselves that we've just brought back.
Mm. And soul retrieval feels very, and I don't know, I have not experienced that, but it feels almost like guiding you back to your your core self, your best self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the visual that I use a lot of times. Like we go back to specific moments in life when our soul broke off or
Mm.
fragmented or fractured or was left behind. Most of the time, we bring it into the present and actually have my clients visualize, like wrapping that part of themselves into their own heart space, right? So we
Mm.
do a little ritual around it. So it's exactly what you just saw. That's exactly what we do.
Wow. Wow. That sounds like really, really powerful work.
It is. I tell people, I'm like, I'm gonna warn you when I do soul retrievals with people, usually they make like big decisions afterward, like within 3 months, they make kind of insane decisions in a good way where they'll like sell their house, leave the city,
Get a
get
divorce, right?
get a divorce. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm good. I had somebody that like bought a car, enrolled back in college, like
Yeah.
within months. It's kind of it's a funny thing after these years for me to see. I'm like, what's this person gonna do? Right, because after we bring those parts back, they're
Yeah.
empowered.
Yes. Yes. I was going to say empowered and really so much more in tune with their values, their what
Yeah.
matters to them.
Yes, yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. So it's interesting too. I know there are IFS teachers and practitioners who use shamanic work sort of side by side. So it makes total sense because it's all
Can't
about
not.
accessing yourself and your parts and the spiritual cultural piece that impacts us too, right? Like it's really,
Yeah.
really amazing.
A lot of times I
Wow.
say I'm like same, different name. Like a lot of modalities are like, we're doing the same thing. We're just calling it by a different name. And yeah, when I hear I'm familiar with internal family systems. I haven't studied it, but I'm,
Hmm.
vaguely familiar with it.
Hmm.
Right now there's a lot of big movements in like somatic work and
Oh,
nervous system
totally.
regulation and there's like all these different modalities kind of popping up and gaining awareness, which I think is beautiful because different people need to hear it differently.
It's true.
And then there's shamanism, which is like a modality in itself, and if we understand that a lot of us are using the same gifts and tools, just
Yeah.
packaging it a little differently for the way that our clients need, they're all
Yeah.
so incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do have one question that before I was going to say what I was going to say. So when you're bringing in the spiritual piece, the spiritual, I don't know if what you call them, guides or, yeah,
Yeah.
spirit
Mhm.
guides, is it typically like, say, for myself, like, would it be my ancestors or is it sort of a greater spiritual presence or could it be any of those things?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It can be any of those things, depending on who I'm working with. Whew, a lot of times we have a whole team behind us guiding us. So you have a
Yeah.
team of spirit guides, lost loved ones who are very close to you, who you talk to a lot. Ancestors dip in and out, especially if you go for a shamanic session, like ancestors likely will show up. Ascended masters will show up. So I have a lot of students and clients who tell me that they see Jesus in our sessions. I'm definitely a fan.
Wow.
So he shows
Wow.
up. And and then I actually lately, honestly, for the last less than a year, I've just been going straight to the source. So I do believe in God. And
Hmm.
a lot of this year, I've just been feeling called to just channel straight from God for my clients, for myself. So a lot of my conversations lately have been straight to the source. But we have
Wow.
we have a whole army of helpers available to us.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. For me personally, that feels really comforting.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Because you can, like you can choose who you lean on.
Yeah,
You have a choice.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if there were a piece of wisdom that you felt was important to share with the listeners, what might that be?
Oh, let's say your listeners right now, like we have one basic hope, which is to open them up. And I just shared about the source that I go to, right? Being God.
Hmm.
One piece of wisdom I would share is, and it's not from a religious standpoint at all, but that God
Hmm.
is real.
Mm.
God is a real force. Like as I'm looking at my window right now, the sun is like getting brighter. It's a real force that can be validated, can be felt, can be heard, can be sensed inside of your body.
Mhm.
No, God's not a man in the sky, right? As far as what I'm aware.
Yeah.
But, what's helpful for me, the wisdom is to think of God as being the sun, the
Mm.
sun, the light itself. And in Egyptian culture, there was a lot around the sun, God, Ra, right?
Mhm.
So for me, when I'm thinking about like if there was one piece of wisdom that I could share, that would be it, that God is real. And when you're questioning God, because I went through a period where I walked away. And again, I'm saying all this from a non-religious standpoint. Like I don't prescribe to any religion. I did in the past, and I left religion and I
Yeah.
left the concept of God, and then I was kind of brought back. Okay. So as
Yeah.
a person who understands, I work with a lot of women with religious trauma as well. As a person who
Sure.
understands like leaving the church and leaving God, leaving your faith, and
Yes.
then being brought back to it without question, like I've experienced without question the presence and the existence and kind of the words of what I call God, what some might call source, or there's all kinds of names for this energy.
Sure. Sure.
But the wisdom would be like when you're questioning its existence, right? And I just think of it also like electricity, but it's light. Light is omnipresent,
Yeah. Energy. Yeah.
right? So it's like when you're in your house and you have the internet and you're like questioning, like, is it working? But then you open up your computer and you see little bars and your internet's working, right? It's here. You can't see it.
But you know it
Now it's not
exists.
even plugged in. You don't even have to plug your internet in anymore. God operates the same way. So it's an energy that is very much alive. It's a power, is what I was just corrected. Like to tell everyone that God is a power, just like
Mm.
electricity, that is very much alive inside of you. That power runs through you. And you can turn it
Mm.
on and you can turn it off. And when you're questioning, just like you can go to Google, you can go to your own intuition, or just sit in a space, sit in your car and just ask out loud, like, are you real? Tell me, are you real? Give me a sign you're real. And then pay attention and
Hmm.
you will be shown. And then once you're shown, start to develop that relationship and start to ask for help or clarity or whatever it is that you need, go to that source inside of yourself and in your space, and just think of it like the sun. And you can get that, whatever it is that you need, directly from the
Mm.
source. That would be
Yeah.
my biggest wisdom that I would share.
Yeah. It's funny because just your story of sort of being entrenched in religion, stepping away, coming back to sort of God or divine being. To me,
Right?
I tend to think of like the universe as my
Yeah,
God is,
exactly. Yeah, whatever you want to call it.
yeah. But it just finding that space of openness to trust that it has brought me what I need, even when I didn't know I needed it.
Exactly. It's insane how incredible it is, and how, well, I get chills thinking about it, just like how it works.
Yeah.
It works when
Yeah.
you're needing something. And sometimes you get what you need, but not what you want in the moment. But what
Right.
you need in the moment is what's going to guide you to what you want when you actually want it. So the other thing with
Yeah.
this intelligent force, this energy, is that it knows better than you do.
Right.
So we're in such an impatient culture right now. I've been feeling everyone's energy speeding up around,
Mm.
and I'm standing in the center of it, and I move slow. I move like in slow motion. Did you ever see the Nutcracker movie from a couple of years ago with Keira Knightley and like,
I didn't. I remember when it was out, but
oh, you guys, it was so good. So
uh,
there are these two worlds, and there's the human world, and then there's the non-human world. And the non-human world, time is not the same as the human world,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
So when you look at, so right now it's like I'm in my own, maybe like 5D kind of reality, and I'm looking around and everything's starting to move really, really fast. And I'm like, what is going on? And
Wow.
everyone's anxiety is like increasing, and they're thinking and they're speaking and they're jumping ahead. And, it's like, whoa, you're watching. It's like it's going to combust.
Mm.
But if everyone can learn to surrender and trust in divine timing, because we want everything right now.
Yes.
We want everything
Yes.
right now, but there is a force that knows better for you when is the right time. So if you're
Yeah.
willing to trust in that, and like, again, if it's God, universe, whoever, whatever you choose to believe in, but if you just say like, all right, I'm going to trust they're going to give it to me at the right time, whether it's money, love, job, house, whatever, then what can
Mm-hmm.
I do right now?
Yeah.
Can you please help me to receive what it is that I need right now?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So beautiful. I have a little sticky note on my computer just to remind me that it's easy. Oh, you can probably there you go. It's easy for me to receive because so often we're not paying attention to what's being offered. I mean, whether it's divine or just universally, and just helps me know that I'm receiving what I need to,
Yes.
even if I'm not paying attention.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
true. So
Yeah.
true.
Well, Athena, how do they find you if they want to know more about you, your work, how to work with you? Yeah,
Yeah. So I have my website, www.seasideshaman.com.
which I love.
There's a lot
Seaside
about
Shaman.
me. Thank you. So there's a lot about me on there, and just like fun facts about my family and my work and my training. I have taught at the Omega Institute in New York, and I'll be back
Oh,
next summer for a
nice.
weekend retreat I'm really excited about. So I lead, I teach, I lead in retreats, and I do a lot of groups through my soul medicine program. I have a membership, which is when women are feeling ready to make healing and growth a regular part of their life, their daily life,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's an ongoing practice, and they're struggling with like staying on track with it, or finding the time to journal and not knowing where to start and what's going on. And again, that fast spinning energy.
Mm.
Soul medicine is a series of weekly classes, open every week, and our members can drop into any class that they want throughout the entire month. And I guide intuitively through journaling, through shamanic journey, through self-healing. We have
Mm.
incredibly open and vulnerable discussions with our tribe
Mm.
members in our
Wow.
sessions. So it's a really beautiful community and a really beautiful safe space for you to do the work with a little bit of support, right? With a little
Oh,
bit of support. So soulmedicine.studio is my program website.
beautiful. That sounds like an amazing space to and just safe. Just the way you're describing it, it feels very safe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And Instagram. I'm active on Instagram. So I love to like connect with people on there. And I post a lot of kind of random thoughts and pictures of my kids and
I was
myself.
going to say, I think I've seen pictures of your family there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
always up to something. So lots of that on there. But occasionally I'll try to post like, little intuitive messages for whoever needs it on my Instagram.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I will share all your links and how to find you on the show notes. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Athena, and she just made the entire experience very comfortable for me. I had shared with her at the beginning that I really didn't know a lot about shamanism, although I had explored her website and looked at her social media. So I had a sense for who she was, but I felt very comfortable asking questions about what shamanism was. And I think what struck me, and we explored this in the conversation, was just that how closely it felt like shamanism, soul retrieval, bringing in spirit guides, sort of resembles internal family systems, really tuning into your parts, tuning into the parts that need healing, and bringing that healing through releasing of legacy burdens or cultural burdens. Like the work felt really comparable and similar in many ways. Yeah, it just really opened up something in me to learn about this it's not new. It's a very ancient path of healing and finding healing. So, if you're interested in knowing more, learning more about Athena and shamanism, you can go to her website, which I will include in the show notes. And if you want to be a part of her group, as she said, that will also be included in the show notes. So, I hope that you will check her out and open yourself up to a new way of healing potentially. Thanks again for joining me on the podcast for this wonderful conversation. If you're interested in learning more about working with me one-on-one or in a group, you can go to elizabethcushcoaching.com/sign up, and you will be added to my mailing list, which gets you the podcast and a newsletter once a month about all the happenings that are going on here in my world. You can also send me an email. There's a link right there at the top of the homepage that says, "Let's talk." And you can send me an email letting me know you want to schedule a one-on-one 30-minute free call. And we can figure out if coaching is the right next step for you and your healing journey in this beautiful life. Thanks for listening. I look forward to connecting with you here on the podcast next time. Thanks for listening to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Music by Andy Cush, sound editing by Laura Disler, and show notes by Kathy Cush. If you'd like more information about me, Biz Cush, and the resources shared today, go to awakenyourwisewoman.com.